Welcome to the Box Score Sports Podcast.
Yes.
Okay, let's go on to our ugly. What was your ugly for week 15?
So this is where we will talk about the 49ers.
Okay, let's talk about the
It's
Niners.
just, I didn't have much hope anyhow, but with basically how the Seahawks game turned out this week with losing to the Packers. But the game plan against the Bears was awesome. It was vintage 49ers, play action, George Kittle, throw it to Garendo, like throw it to the running back, and it gives you hope. And then you come into the Rams game, which the Rams defense isn't very good, especially throwing the ball deep. And it was everything the 49ers aren't good at. And then just trying to throw it to Deebo Samuel, who obviously can't catch. Um, and the defense played awesome the whole game. The Rams did nothing until the three drops where Dre Greenlaw went out because his knee was sore after coming back. It's just, there's already a bad season. And then Devondre Campbell, who I hate anyhow, like just refuses to play.
All right, we'll
Um,
take them. We'll take them right now. The Lions. No, I'm just kidding.
but it just, I, I would never be like we should fire Kyle Shanahan, but his genius is also his downfall because he gets stubborn and he has something he's trying to do, and he's just going to keep trying to do it. And when it's working, it's a thing of beauty, and it's been to two Super Bowls. Um, but this year, it's just been off. And trying to get Deebo Samuel going when you haven't really needed him in the wins anyhow that you got
Right.
this year. It's just frustrating to see, and you just wasted away a chance because if you win that game, Seattle loses. Cool, you win two of your last three games, and you're probably winning the division based on
Mhm.
what has happened to the Seahawks in this last game. You basically beat the Dolphins and the Cardinals, and you're probably the division winner. And now you have a legit chance to beat the Lions, perhaps, with all the injuries on defense, at least score some points. It's in San Francisco. But it's just ugly, and it's a waste of, I don't want to say a waste of a season because they weren't winning the Super Bowl based on what has happened anyhow. But it's just, that was the first time this year that I've been totally like, what are we even doing? Why am I even watching this right now?
Okay. Kyle Shannon. So do you think you said you don't think they should fire him? How are you feeling as far as his level of like moving forward with him though? Because, obviously, the Dolphins are getting the same questions like with McDaniels, right? Like, oh, should we fire the coach or whatever? But I'm just kind of curious where your state of mind is on the coach and GM at this point. Do you feel like after the season, let's see what they do next season, or should you move on because things are going to start to get a little bit expensive for you guys, right?
Yeah, I would always go 1 year longer with a coach that I still think he's a good coach. I just think if things at times aren't how he wants them, it kind of falls apart, which I think is, like you said, similar to Miami. When things kind of go off script, it doesn't look as good. Because would hate to, I mean, they did this with Jim Harbaugh. If you fire a coach and you don't have a good replacement lined up, you're just
Mm-hmm.
condemning yourself
Yep.
to not being good. So they'll have next year to still be keep most of the guys together. Um, but if next year goes like this, then unfortunately, I think that you probably would have to move on. And I would hate it because I think that Kyle Shanahan is literally like Andy Reid from 20 years ago when Andy Reid was with the Eagles and the Eagles kept losing in championship game or in the Super Bowl the one time, and it just takes time to figure it out. That would be my regret of it, but I would give it one more year and go down with the ship.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the problem is like so anytime you want to move on from the coach is like who you're replacing him with, right? So I'm with you. I think you need to wait a year at least one more year. I just how do you feel about Pretty though? Like you because you're gonna go another you got to pay him, right? Or no, they got one more year technically, right? Or do they have to pay him
Yeah,
this year?
he can be extended this offseason. So like even if they extended him, if you paid him 60 million a year, I think his salary next year would be like 10 because you can
Okay.
fold in the extension because he only gets paid like $1 million this year
Okay.
on his current deal. So I mean, I don't really have any hesitations with Brock Purdy. Like
Okay.
I don't think he's been um bad. I don't think he's been overly good, but some of that, like he has a touchdown pass in this game to Debo Samuel, who just and I know drops happen in all games, so
Right.
I don't like to cherry pick, but his overall numbers are still top 10 in the NFL
Hmm.
when it comes to like QBR and depth of throw and tight window throws. So, which is I feel better because they've had McCaffrey for what 2.5 games, 2 games and a quarter,
Yeah, that's
which
true.
everyone said he needs Christian McCaffrey, and Ayuk basically didn't play all this year. Um, so I feel the same about Brock Purdy. Like I've never thought that Brock Purdy was like that upper echelon of quarterbacks, but like I don't think he's a bottom 15 quarterback anyway. So you got to pay what you got to pay. Otherwise, you know, what are you gonna go down to? Jimmy
No.
Garoppolo again, right?
Yeah, so I guess the other option would be like Sam Darnold, right? Like if the Vikings for some reason you could go get him. But yeah, I ultimately agree with you. Just at least give it one more year. I do think there's a difference between like a system coach. They can be great, but culture coaches are a little better if they can because they're more of delegators and all their goal is to create the culture and the atmosphere. And that's why you get like I'm not saying that Dan Campbell's a better coach than Kyle Shanahan. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is like with him, he can motivate people to play, right? Like, and then he lets Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson to do their thing offensively and defensively, and he gets everybody good to go. And I think there's a little bit of a benefit to that versus somebody like a system coach because they will always rely on their system to get the job done, not necessarily like they're not a motivator. They're not going to motivate players to play beyond their means. You know what I'm saying? So it's a little I think it's a little different. That's why I thought Robert Saleh was so good on the defensive side of the ball because he was the kind of the rah-rah guy on that side of the ball that got that defense motivated.
Yeah, and I always think either side has its like pluses and minuses. Like I think Dan Campbell is like that team will always play hard for him, even if they were 1-15 going into
Hmm.
the last game. And I think you also get with Dan Campbell like the second half of that Niners game where when you make like we're gonna go for it, we're gonna go for it, and then when
Hmm.
it doesn't work and the tide changes, like you get the uh-oh moment. And I think it's the
Hmm.
same with like Kyle Shanahan. You get to the Super Bowl, you're winning 10-0. Patrick Mahomes takes the lead and the system is so finely tuned that one guy misses the block and then you're like, uh-oh.
Right. Correct. Yeah.
Like I think every team has that. I mean the Chiefs probably had that, before they finally broke through. But like you said, you just hate to move off of Kyle Shanahan unless you were convinced you were getting Ben Johnson and you really believed in Ben Johnson and that was the way to go forward. Otherwise, if you're just going to fire Kyle Shanahan and bring in um, Mike McDaniel, like what do we do? No, like if you're just
Right.
going to bring in or someone unknown to a degree for this team, you're like, what are we doing? Are we just throwing it all out, or just? I would prefer to ride it to the bottom next year and be like, all right, we ran this cycle, it's over.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. But yeah, I guess we'll see where you guys go from there. Hopefully, they don't have a rough start like a bunch of injuries because I really think that's what derailed your season more than anything. But and I know it goes back to the Lions thing, and I wish I would have brought this up in that segment. All teams go through injuries, but it gets to the point where injuries are ridiculous. There's a difference between a reason and an excuse. I think like injuries to a certain point is just an excuse people make, and then when you get to it, it becomes the reason. Like, yeah, we can't overcome these injuries. So, I just hope they have a better start to their season next year for your sake.
That would be great.
Okay, let me just hit on my ugly real quick. It's going to go to Jonathan Taylor. Uh, That was my bad, but I'm gonna give him my ugly because he really turned so up 13-7 against the Colts. He was walking into the end zone and he dropped the ball and didn't score. And it went to the Broncos. If he would have scored, it would have been a 20-7 game. And then after that, like the Colts totally imploded. So it's not just Jonathan Taylor; it's like the Colts as well. It wasn't a flea flicker; it was like a screen pass, and then throwing it back to the quarterback to throw it deep, and it got pick six. It was just an ugly, ugly quarter and a half for the Colts after the Jonathan Taylor thing. And I do want to say that this is why I think running backs can learn from Barry Sanders. Okay, just get the ball in the end zone and hand the ball to the referee because then at least you know you scored, okay? Like, I don't understand it. So they get my ugly just for the whole sequence of events that had them fall apart because obviously, even though it was a long shot, they still had a chance to get to the playoffs, but they're not going to get there. So,
Yeah, I will never get the drop the ball before the end zone. Like, I know you want to celebrate, but it's literally a giant white line with pylons. Just at least if you're going to drop the ball, like put the ball in way in front of you,
right.
so you can drop it when you're at the 1 yard line because your arms are reaching over. And the Bengals did that too, I believe. Was that the Bengals game?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Like I just, when you dive for the end zone, I get it sometimes, and the guy kind of loses it. At least you're putting for like.
You're trying to make a play there. You're trying to make a play, right?
Like Jonathan Taylor, how many touchdowns did he score in Wisconsin too? Like he was like a touchdown machine. Like you
Right.
know how to get over the goal line.
Right.
So it's a total backbreaker too, because you're like, oh wow, right? You go from about to be 20-7 to the Broncos have the ball.
Correct. Yeah, and then it's just like Richardson interception, the interception thrown by the receiver, then another Richardson interception. It just kind of snowballed from there, so it was rough. And then you made the Broncos look pretty good. So,
Hey, as wrong as I was with the Falcons, the Colts just really helped my Broncos as the dark horse in the AFC.
No, you were 100% right about
You
that.
win
correct.
some, you lose some.
Well, and you were right about Sam Darnold. I'll do an honorary mention. Ugly is Tua. I'm just gonna throw him in there. There were some really bad passes, including the one that led to that concussion for that wide receiver. So I didn't. You were kind of self-deprecating. I should have done the same thing with my team, but I just thought that the Colts sequence was a lot worse than what the Dolphins did. But some really bad passes by Tua in that game. So just an honorary mention there.
That was not pleasant to watch for sure.
No. Okay, you ready to move on to our topic? Thanks so much for watching this clip of the Box Score Sports Podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to our channel. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter or X. And we'll talk to you guys real soon. See ya.